What happens when a man who believes a person's worth is measured in quarterly profits meets a man who knows a company's value is measured by its soul? It's a collision that doesn't happen with a bang, but with the quiet swish of a mop on a marble floor, a sound that is about to echo louder than any stock market closing bell. The story begins on a Tuesday, on the 48th floor of the glass and steel skyscraper that housed the global headquarters of Viridian Dynamics. The air up there was different, filtered, cold, and carrying the subtle scent of money and power. It was the domain of Marcus Thorne, the CEO. Marcus didn't walk. He glided through the halls. His $3,000 suit was his armor, his sharp smile was his weapon, and his unwavering belief in his own genius was his gospel. To him, Viridian wasn't a company. It was an empire, and he was its emperor. He had taken the helm 5 years prior, and in the eyes of Wall Street, he was a prodigy. He doubled profits, cut costs with a surgeon's precision, and turned Viridian into a lean, efficient, and utterly soulless machine. And then there was Arthur Vance. At 68, Arthur was practically invisible, a silent shadow who moved through the halls in the hours when most employees had either already left or had yet to arrive. His blue janitor's uniform was immaculate, yet anonymous.
He knew every crack in the marble, every creak of a door, every stain that stubbornly refused to leave. He wiped down the conference tables where multi-million-dollar deals were made, and emptied the trash cans where brilliant ideas and broken careers were discarded with the same indifference.
He was not seen, not heard, and certainly not known. To the few people who noticed him, he was just the janitor. On this particular morning, the air on the 48th floor was more charged than usual. A group of Swiss investors was arriving, and Marcus wanted everything to be perfect. Perfection for Marcus was a reflection of himself. He strode across the main lobby, his Italian shoes making an authoritative click on the polished floor, his vice president, David, hurrying to keep up. "Is the presentation ready? Are the numbers updated to the minute?" Marcus asked, without looking at David. "Yes, Marcus. All set. They're going to be impressed," David replied, breathless. It was then that Marcus stopped, his eagle eye locked onto an imperfection. Near the entrance to the main conference room, there was a small, nearly dry trail of spilled coffee, a tiny, insignificant brown stain on an ocean of white marble. To anyone else, it would have been invisible. To Marcus, it was a personal affront. "What is that?" he hissed, his face twisting into a mask of disgust. David blinked, not understanding. "What, Marcus?" "That," Marcus pointed. "It looks like an animal marked its territory on my floor." It was at that moment that Arthur Vance appeared, pushing his cleaning cart. He had already seen the stain and was on his way to clean it. He moved with his usual quiet efficiency, grabbing a cloth and a spray bottle. He didn't say a word, his focus on the task. Marcus watched Arthur kneel. The sight of an old man in a uniform cleaning the floor he commanded ignited something ugly inside him, a mixture of impatience and contempt. "You!" Marcus barked. Arthur looked up, his calm, wrinkled face showing mild surprise. "Yes, you! How long has this filth been here? 5 minutes? 10? Were you planning to leave it as a piece of modern art for our guests?" Arthur remained kneeling. "Sir, I was in another wing. I just saw it, and came to clean it immediately." His voice was low and steady, without a hint of subservience, only fact. This calmness seemed to enrage Marcus even more. He turned to David and a group of young analysts who had stopped, paralyzed by the tension. "Do you see this?" Marcus said, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "This is what's wrong with the old guard. Slowness, lack of proactivity, a not-my-job mentality." He turned back to Arthur, who was now standing, cloth in hand. "What's your name?" "Arthur, sir. Arthur Vance." "Arthur," Marcus repeated the name as if it left a bad taste in his mouth. "Arthur, how long have you been working for this company?" Since the beginning, sir. 40 years. Marcus let out a laugh, a short, cruel burst. 40 years. 40 years, and your greatest achievement is cleaning up other people's spilled coffee. Extraordinary. The humiliation hung in the air, thick and toxic. The analysts stared at the floor, at anywhere but Arthur's face. The only one watching was Leah, a junior analyst in her first year, her face pale with shock and indignation. She remembered Arthur. The week before, she'd lost an heirloom earring from her grandmother, and it was Arthur who had found it near a trash can and returned it to her with a kind smile, refusing any reward. Marcus stepped toward Arthur, invading his personal space. You know what I see when I look at you, Arthur? I see a cost. I see a liability. I see a dinosaur who doesn't understand that in this new world, you either produce value or you become obsolete. He turned to his captive audience. Viridian Dynamics has no more room for obsolescence. We have no room for passengers. We are building a rocket ship here, and everyone on board needs to be rowing. He fixed his cold eyes on Arthur. And you, my friend, are not rowing. You are just taking up space. The silence was absolute. Then, Marcus spoke the words that would seal his own fate. Pack your things. You're fired. I want you out of this building in 10 minutes. He turned, pleased with himself, as if he had just performed a brilliant surgery. He had removed the tumor. He had demonstrated strength. The Swiss investors would be impressed by his decisive leadership. Arthur Vance stood motionless for a moment, the coffee stain completely forgotten. He looked at Marcus Thorne's back as he walked away. His face showed no anger, no sadness. It showed something far deeper, a cold clarity, a steely resolve. Marcus Thorne had no idea. He had no idea that he hadn't just fired a janitor. He had just declared war on the very heart of the company he thought he owned. The real battle for Viridian Dynamics had only just begun. News of Arthur's firing spread through the 48th floor like a poisonous whisper. No one said anything openly to Marcus. On the contrary, his vice president, David, praised him. It was a show of force, Marcus. You showed everyone you won't tolerate anything less than excellence. Marcus absorbed the praise like a dry sponge. In his mind, the incident was already an anecdote he would tell at dinner parties to illustrate his ruthless management philosophy. He felt invincible, a titan of industry at the peak of his power. Meanwhile, Arthur Vance did not pack his things. He left his cleaning cart exactly where it was, a silent sentinel in the middle of the hallway. He walked calmly to the service elevator, rode it down to the ground floor, and stepped out the back door into the humid city air, for the first time in 40 years, with no intention of returning the next day. But he didn't go home. Not to the small apartment everyone assumed he had. A black car, a discreet but expensive sedan, pulled up at the corner. The driver got out and opened the rear door. Mr. Vance, everything is planned? Arthur slid into the car, the scent of leather and polished wood replacing that of cleaning supplies. Things have changed, Robert. Move up the timeline. The car pulled away from the Viridian skyscraper. Inside the building, Marcus Thorne was toasting the future with the Swiss investors. Outside the building, Arthur Vance was about to ensure Marcus wouldn't be a part of that future. The car took him to a stone house in an old, tree-lined neighborhood, a place of quiet wealth and ancient power. Inside, the walls were lined with books and art. Over the fireplace hung an old photograph of a much younger Arthur next to another man, both smiling, holding a crudely painted wooden sign that read, Viridian Dynamics. Arthur sat in a worn leather armchair and made a call. Elizabeth, it's Arthur. Yes, I'm fine. Actually, no, it happened. Today. No, it was even worse than we imagined. He did it publicly. Yes, in front of the team. He paused, listening. I need you to call an emergency board meeting. No, not as shareholders. Use the clause, the guardian clause. Yes, that one. And Elizabeth, buy everything you can. Use the trust fund. I want a controlling block. On the other end of the line was Elizabeth Reed, his financial advisor of 30 years and one of the few people who knew the truth. She managed a fortune that would make Marcus Thorne's eyes pop. A fortune built not just from Viridian's initial profits, but from decades of shrewd investments. Arthur Vance's fortune. In the days that followed, life at Viridian went on. Marcus was euphoric. The deal with the Swiss was a success. The stock price rose 3%. He felt like a king. He barely noticed the strange activity in his company's stock. Large blocks of shares were being quietly bought up by an unknown holding company called Cornerstone Holdings. His CFO mentioned it in passing. Probably just an index fund rebalancing, Marcus said, dismissing the concern. Arrogance was a veil, and his was impenetrable. Leah, the young analyst, however, couldn't forget. The image of Arthur's calm face as he was humiliated was seared into her mind. She felt a pang of complicity, of cowardice. In an act of small rebellion, she started digging. Who was Arthur Vance? There was nothing on him in the employee records beyond his start date, June 1st, 1984. The same day the company was founded. A strange coincidence. She dug deeper into the company's old digital archives, late at night when no one was watching. And then she found it. A yellowed photo from a 1988 press release. In it, two young men. One was their previous retired CEO. The other? She zoomed in, her heart beating faster. It was a young, smiling Arthur Vance. The caption read, "Viridian Dynamics founders, Thomas Lowell and Arthur Vance, celebrate the opening of their first factory." Leah sat back, the screen's glow illuminating her shocked face. It couldn't be. It was impossible. The janitor was the founder. She didn't know what to do with this information. It was too dangerous. Telling someone could cost her her job. But staying silent felt like an even greater betrayal. A week after Arthur's humiliation, an email landed in the inbox of every senior executive and board member. The subject: summons for an extraordinary board meeting. The sender was Cornerstone Holdings, which, the email stated, had invoked Clause 7B of the original Viridian Dynamics bylaws, the Guardian Clause. No one knew what it was. Most of the original bylaws had been replaced with more modern versions. Marcus Thorne was furious. "Who the hell is Cornerstone?" he yelled at his legal department. "How dare they call a meeting of my board?" His lawyers were stumped. The clause was archaic, but technically still valid. It allowed the holder of the original founder's shares to call a vote of no confidence if they believed the core mission and values of the company were in jeopardy. But those shares hadn't been seen in decades, presumed sold or diluted into non-existence. "Find out who's behind this and crush them," Marcus ordered. But it was too late. The meeting was set for the following Friday. Marcus saw it as an annoyance, a hostile takeover attempt by some obscure competitor. He prepared for battle. He would rally his numbers, his profit charts, and he would annihilate these intruders. He didn't realize he wasn't preparing for a takeover. He was preparing for his own judgment. And the judge was a man he had deemed worthless and thrown away like trash. The boardroom on the 48th floor was Marcus's sanctuary. With its 30-foot mahogany table, its leather chairs that cost more than a small car, and its panoramic view of the city, the room exuded power. That Friday, the power in the air felt different. It was charged, electric, like the air before a storm. The board members, men and women accustomed to control, seemed restless. They didn't know what to expect. Marcus Thorne entered last, as he always did. He was at the height of his confidence. He wore his sharpest suit, his most predatory smile. He felt like a lion entering his own arena. He glanced at the empty chair at the head of the table, reserved for the representative of the mysterious Cornerstone Holdings. "It seems our guest of honor is late," he said with a sneer. He began the meeting without waiting. He launched into a passionate defense of his own reign. Charts flashed on the giant screen behind him. soaring profits, expanded margins, a skyrocketing stock price. "Ladies and gentlemen," he declared, his voice ringing with authority, "Viridian Dynamics has never been stronger, more profitable, more respected. And we are the ones who made it so, with tough decisions, by cutting what didn't work, by removing the dead weight." He paused dramatically, looking at each board member. "Last week, for example, I myself fired a cleaning staff employee, a man who had been here for 40 years. 40 years! And what did he have to show for it? Nothing. He was a symbol of the old Viridian, slow, complacent, and I removed him. Because in this company, every single person, from the cleaning crew to the CEO, must add value. That is leadership. That is what makes us great." As the words "add value" still echoed in the room, the two large oak doors at the far end opened silently. A man walked in. It wasn't an executive with a leather briefcase. It was Arthur Vance. But not the Arthur Vance they knew. He wasn't wearing the blue uniform. He wore a simple but perfectly tailored gray wool suit. His shoes were polished to a soft gleam. He wasn't carrying a mop, but an old leather portfolio. He walked into the room not with the invisibility of a janitor, but with the quiet presence of a man who owned the very floor he walked on. Marcus Thorne stopped mid-sentence. His face went through a series of micro-expressions: confusion, irritation, rage. "What are you doing here?" he spat. "I told you, you're fired. Security, get this man out of here." Two burly security guards moved toward Arthur, but they stopped when one of the oldest board members, a man named George Maxwell, gasped. "My God! Arthur? Is that really you?" Arthur smiled at George, a genuine, weary smile. "Hello, George. It's been a long time." He turned to the table, his calm eyes landing on each shocked face, and finally, on Marcus Thorne, whose smile had vanished, replaced by a mask of confused disbelief. "I apologize for the interruption, Mr. Thorne," Arthur said, his voice filling the room, not with volume, but with an innate weight of authority. "My name, as some of you may remember, is Arthur Vance, and I am the representative of Cornerstone Holdings." A murmur swept through the room. Marcus turned pale. "This is absurd. Is this some kind of joke?" "It's no joke, Marcus," Arthur said. He opened his portfolio and placed a single document on the table, the company's original articles of incorporation. "I wasn't just working for this company for 40 years. I founded it, in my basement, with Thomas Lowell. I designed our first product. I hired our first 10 employees. And I wrote the bylaws you've conveniently forgotten." The silence in the room was so profound, you could hear the hum of the electronics. Leah, who had been brought in to take notes, felt as if the air had been sucked from her lungs. It was true. It was all true. Arthur continued, his voice never rising, but every word landing like a hammer blow. "You talk about adding value, Marcus. Let's talk about value. In the last 5 years, our stock price has doubled. Congratulations. But our employee turnover rate has tripled. Our spending on research and development, the very lifeblood of this company, has been cut by 60%. We've lost our top 3 engineers to competitors because they could no longer stand the toxic culture you created." He walked slowly around the table, his eyes never leaving Marcus's. "You didn't build a rocket ship, Marcus. You've dismantled a finely crafted Swiss watch and sold off the parts. You confused profit with prosperity. You thought the heart of a company is in its balance sheet, when in fact, it's in its people." He stopped directly in front of Marcus. "Last week, you didn't fire a janitor. You humiliated a man. You tried to strip him of his dignity in front of his colleagues. And you did it because, in your worldview, he was worthless. You did it to show your power. But power, Marcus, is not the ability to humiliate. It's the ability to inspire. And you inspire no one." Arthur turned to the board. "I invoked the Guardian Clause because this company has lost its way. It has become a greedy, hollow shell of what it was meant to be. Cornerstone Holdings, which is me, now holds 42% of the voting shares. I need a simple majority to effect a change. He looked at his old friends, at the new faces, at everyone in the room. I move for a vote of no confidence in the leadership of Marcus Thorne, effective immediately. Marcus finally found his voice, a strangled mix of panic and fury. This is insane! He's a janitor. Are you going to believe this? This lunatic? But no one was looking at Marcus. They were all looking at Arthur, and they didn't see a janitor. They saw a founder. They saw a leader. They saw the soul of Viridian Dynamics, which they thought was lost forever, standing right in front of them. The vote was a formality. Hand after hand went up. Unanimous. Marcus Thorne's face crumbled. The arrogance, the confidence, the cruelty, it all melted away, revealing the small, frightened man underneath. He sank into his chair, defeated. The Emperor had no clothes. Arthur didn't gloat. He simply nodded. He turned to the security guards, who were still standing confused. Please escort Mr. Thorne out of the building. Give him 10 minutes to pack his things. The irony was so thick it was almost palpable. The same sentence, the same humiliation returned to its sender. Justice wasn't just served, it was poetic. Marcus Thorne's exit was not noticed by many. He left via the service elevator, a broken man. His empire crumbled by the man he considered less than nothing. The news would spread like wildfire, of course. But for now, on the 48th floor, a new era had begun. Arthur Vance stood at the head of the table, the place that had always been his by right. He didn't sit. He addressed the stunned board. Ladies and gentlemen, the work begins now. We are going to rebuild. We will reinvest in our people. We will innovate again. Viridian Dynamics will once again become a place we can all be proud of. His gaze then found Leah, who was standing in the corner trembling. Leah, he said, his voice now gentle. Please come here. Hesitantly, she approached. Yes, Mr. Vance. I heard about your research, he said with a faint smile. You have curiosity and courage, qualities this company desperately needs. I'm creating a new department, the Department of Culture and Innovation. It will report directly to me. I'd like you to lead it. Leah gaped, unable to form words. From taking notes to leading a department in a matter of minutes. She could only nod, tears welling in her eyes. 2 weeks later, Viridian Dynamics was a transformed place. Fear had been replaced by hope. Layoffs were frozen. R&D budgets were restored. And in the main lobby, a new addition was made to the Wall of Honor. Next to the oil portrait of co-founder Thomas Lowell, a matching portrait of Arthur Vance now hung. But Arthur was rarely seen on the 48th floor. He spent his days walking the floors, talking to engineers, to the marketing team, to the cafeteria staff. And once a week, every Tuesday morning, he would put on a clean blue uniform, grab a cleaning cart, and spend an hour cleaning the main lobby. He did it, he said, so he would never forget where the company came from. To never forget that the most important work in any organization is the work that often goes unnoticed. He did it to remind himself and everyone else that a person's worth is never determined by their job title, but by their character. Let this story be a reminder. In a world obsessed with titles, hierarchies, and superficial power, true authority often hides in plain sight. It lies in quiet dignity, in hard-won wisdom, and in the strength of someone who knows their own value, regardless of how the world sees them. Because a throne can be taken, but respect has to be earned. And sometimes, the man who mops the floor is the only true king in the building. If this story touched you, if you believe that dignity is worth more than any title, then help this message find others who need to hear it. Share this video with a friend, a family member, or on your social media. Every share is one more voice celebrating respect. We want to hear your story. Comment below, Have you ever witnessed an Arthur Vance in real life? Someone who was underestimated, ignored, or humiliated, but who ultimately revealed a strength and value that silenced all the critics. Your story could inspire hundreds of others in the comments. And so you don't miss any powerful stories of justice where arrogance is confronted and true character triumphs. Subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell. We create content for people like you who believe the best stories are about the quiet strength that changes the world. Thank you for watching, and never forget to look beyond the uniforms and the job titles. The real value is always beneath the surface.